for couches.
Couches.
We might when we get the new room.
Couches.
We might.
What new room?
We'll talk about it tonight.
Yeah, surprise.
Hello, everybody. Appreciate you for joining us here on the Blessing and Cursing podcast.
Squeaky chair podcast.
Yeah, we're about as professional as the next podcast, but we have we've got a little bit better story than the next podcast, I'd say. We have another guest with us here today. I'm really enjoying the amount of guests we're getting. I'm liking the breakup of the new stories and the new people, and it's not just us. Yeah. There's only so much we can talk about. So I'll let him introduce himself and kind of give us a little bit about yourself.
My name's Jonathan Reid, and I actually found out about this podcast from Jonathan Barker. And I guess a little bit about me, how far you want to go back, I don't know. I was born in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Oak Ridge Hospital, and lived in Harriman my whole life. I grew up at the Harriman Baptist Tabernacle. My pastor was James Jones. Went there from, in my mother's womb till I left to go, till I, graduated high school and left and moved on. And I guess, and it was one of those, I went to church, 3 times a week. If there was any kind of revival, if there was any special meeting, we went to every single thing. My mom's a Christian school teacher. She moved here she's from Abbeville, South Carolina, a little Civil War town in South Carolina, and Dad's from here. His family's originally from Allgood, Tennessee, and then they moved here in the 20s. And then, so my dad, he's a deacon at the Harriman Baptist Tabernacle, still there. He's been the choir director there 40 years or something, still going there. My parents, and I have 2 older sisters. She's a Christian school teacher as well. And then my other sister, she lives at home and everything. And just very faithful to church, always been faithful to God. And I grew up in that bubble. Mm-hmm. So my testimony is a little different. And I think I always almost used to be embarrassed. I didn't want to share it. It's one of those it's not, it's not that big a deal kind of a thing, But it's the same God that can save, these horrible, wretched, people or that are in all these drugs or that there's some kind of, child molester or something like that. He can still save a child. The word that God's word can be revealed to an 8-year-old or a 108-year-old, and it's powerful. I remember when I was growing up, I heard it all the time. We had all, these evangelists and all these preachers and everything, and we were just always around church people and everything. And it was one of those, and I was struggling with it, and it would just go back and forth, and it was like I wasn't into this, gross sin, into this horrible things and all that, but it was like there was something, and I as a young child I believed hell was real, mm-hmm. and I knew that was someplace I didn't want to go,
right,
and it kept, it just eat at me, and I've never been one to really reach out and try to, talk to people and whatnot, but it was it was bothering me, just making me miserable, and I was actually over at my aunt's house, and we were reading a story, and she reminded me of it a little while back, but I remember we were reading the story, and we went through it and everything, and then she could tell I was bothered about it, and she said, she had just asked me about it. She said, "Would you like to be saved?" Mm-hmm. And I said no. I said no, and it was one of I'll never forget that. And the devil really used that later in my life. That you remember it, like you said no that first time, and then it was like she didn't talk me into it. It was one of those I needed that, I needed that extra little that push.
Yeah.
But I prayed and asked Jesus into my heart that day, and that was 1996. So I was 8 years old, and my middle sister and I have argued over it because I had this date in my head, and she had this date in her head, because it was somewhere. Her birthday is February 23rd, and she had it around there, and I had it somewhere over in January, and it's one of those things. The date doesn't matter. I know what happened that day, and but then let's fast forward a little bit. I was about 8 years old. So my mom was a Christian school teacher when I was younger, and Dad worked. He worked out at Y12. He retired from out there, and from the second grade to the sixth grade, we were trying to save money and do different things, and so we actually homeschooled us for a while, and then so we did that and everything, and then started the seventh grade at Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, and we went through and graduated there, and that's ultimately where I met my wife. I was in eighth grade, and she was in seventh grade, and it was one of those. I remember that first day. I remember seeing her. It's one of those. We've only been married 9 years, and people are like, oh, you're just, you're getting there and all that stuff. It's like we go way back. We go back to the seventh and eighth grade, and I just remember just like I knew back then. She thinks I'm crazy, but I was like, that's the girl I'm going to marry. And so we dated on and off, and then I guess it was September 11th, 2001. I was in eighth grade, and we were in class. I want to say it was Bible class or something like that. And that was when we found out that the planes had hit and everything. And I at that time, I was trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I grew up in a very strict home, and a very biblical, very godly home. And even the church I went to, it was never forced on me, never pushed on me. Like, you need to be a preacher, you need to be a missionary, you need to do God's will.
Yeah.
You need to seek out God's will, and that was something very, very powerful that I learned from my parents. Was if you decide what that is, you decide what God's will is. Like, we're behind you 100%. There's no matter what it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing too big or too small. We're behind you 100%. And so that day, it really changed. Something really changed, and that September 11th, I took that very personally, and that was when I decided it. At that time, I was like, I'm going to go in the military, and my pastor at the time, he was a Marine. He was in the Marines back in the '60s, and it's like I look back, the people I was around a lot. Growing up, they crawled across the beaches of Normandy. They were in Vietnam. Those were the people that I tried to emulate. These
Sure.
were godly men. These were men's men. It was one of those, and that was who I really looked up to and everything. And then I decided that's what I was going to do, and I told my oldest sister about it. She was actually the first one to know about it. She wasn't really too sure about it and whatever. She kept it until I told everybody about it. And
That's a good sister.
she knew for probably about a year. I said I was going to go in the Marines, and she's like, because it's like, I'm 160 pounds now. I was about 120 when and that was holding a 20-pound weight probably. So when I decided, some people are just like, that's crazy, but it's like, I knew that's what God wanted me to do, and that's what I was going to do. And I thought, if I'm going to go in the military, I'm going to go all out. So that's what I did. I joined the Marines in 2005. And a funny story, when we all know how high school was, we're dating, we're not dating, we're not talking, I'm doing date your best friend. So that stuff was going on, and Rebecca and I we weren't even together at that point. And so she sent me off. I give her a hard time over this. She sent me off to boot camp and didn't even have a girlfriend. So I left and went to boot camp, and I'd been there a little while, a month or two, and I joke around. I got a reverse Dear John letter, and she said, it was a mistake and everything, and I think we should be, I think we should be back together and all that. So when I came home that November, is really, I think that was when we both kind of mentally decided, like, this is what we're going to do. So I I went back and ended up going to Okinawa, Japan for 2 years. I was stationed there, and then she went off to Pensacola Christian College, and we talked, that whole time and everything. That was very difficult and all that, even when I was in Okinawa and she was there. And then I came back to the States, and I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, and went to Afghanistan in 2009. And then I came back, got out in 2010, and then she graduated in 2011. And I guess 2010 was when we finally got engaged, and it was one of those like finally, and like. And so we got engaged, and then we got married October of that next year. And we got a 4-year-old little boy named Justin, and a 10-month-old named Jocelyn. So Justin, he was born in 2017, and he was he came about a month and a half early, and he just. It was like he was small. He was small, and then he was kind of gaining weight. He's about 5 pounds, and we were expecting this monster. My wife's 5'2", barely 100 pounds, and I was 10'4" when I was born. So we were expecting this just mondo baby, and then he comes out half my birth weight.
Yeah.
And so he was doing okay, but that day he was born, he was having a lot of trouble breathing and everything. So straight to Children's Hospital about 2 or 3 hours after he was born. We spent about a week there, and he was meeting the marks and everything. Got his bilirubin levels and all that stuff leveled out. The breathing was doing well, and then he about 3 months in, we noticed that he had gained weight. And he was gaining, and you're supposed to double your birth weight and all that stuff. Well, he reached 10 pounds, and then he just kind of leveled out. And he was just really fussy and everything, couldn't figure out what was going on. And he was about 3 months old. And then he was kind of messing with his ear, kind of pulling on his ear and everything. So she took him to the doctor. My wife's a nurse. Took him to the doctor and everything. And I was at work, didn't think anything about it. Kids get sick, whatever. So she calls me, and she said, we're going over to see a specialist. And I thought, what in the world? So when they took him in for this ear infection, his pediatrician, who is my wife's boss, she noticed that he had a really bad heart murmur, and it was very pronounced. But he was so small when he was born, you couldn't hear it because his heart and everything was so small. Come to find out, he had about a 7 millimeter hole in one part of his heart and a 2 millimeter hole in another part of his heart. Now, you're talking about, at this time, his heart's about the size of a walnut, and a 7 millimeter hole and a 2 millimeter hole, that's a lot. Yeah. So what they said, essentially what was going on was, like when he was eating and stuff like that, it would be like us eating while running on a treadmill. His heart was essentially just pumping in circles, and so it was having to work so hard to take care of all the holes that it was, he was actually struggling. So they told us these things that they wanted us to do to help him gain weight and all this stuff, because it was one of those do nothing, and he may not make it to 20 years old, and he's going to have surgery if you're going to expect him to make it any further. And so we did every single thing. That's, my wife is very strong in that, very task oriented. She did everything. I mean, it was exhausting because it was like she was able to just pretty much quit work. They allowed her to just quit work and just focus on that. And then I was having to go to work and everything, make sure everything was kept up. And we did everything and took him in. He didn't gain an ounce. So they said, they wanted that to get him strong enough to survive the surgery, is the way they said it.
Yes.
And it was one of those, I'm a black or white kind of a thing. I don't need to, what if this, and I was like, you just got to tell us. I was like, if he needs the surgery, then that's what we need to do. And my wife's a nurse, so she's understanding all this terminology and everything that comes out. I was a truck driver in the Marines. It's one of those, like, I'm a pretty logical person, but I was really struggling. I'm drinking from a fire hydrant here. And so But that's where God came in. I mean, He was there the whole time. But when we thought it was an ear infection is what we took him in for, and then that's when they discovered this heart murmur, and then it was like, and then we went and met with the specialist, and they said there's no spots at Vanderbilt right now for his surgery, and so so we went a month, and then the cardiologist was like, well, let me just call one more time, and there was a spot open. So June the 30th of 2017, we took him down there, had open heart surgery, and they were able to. There's this lining that grows on the inside of your chest wall, and that's the ideal thing that they want to use. And they actually open the heart and patch the holes with that, and then scar tissue kind of grows over that. So did all of that, and then it was like 6 hours. You're talking about a little boy that had never been able to eat an ounce without just going to sleep because he was so exhausted. And then it was like 6 hours after surgery or something like that. He was just down in like a 6-ounce bottle. It's insane. And I'm convinced that they're the strongest thing on the planet now after watching him go through that.
Yes.
And he's 4 years old now and 100 miles an hour everywhere he goes. And then, a few years later, go ahead.
Real quick before you go.
Yeah.
Have you spoken to him?
No, but I did see y'all had a little conversation just then.
Yeah.
So
My daughter was also having a heart murmur issue, and
Yeah.
she also had to have surgery. She
Oh, my
was also
goodness.
very small. So that's awesome.
And very lethargic and slow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You could definitely see that.
Which is also my granddaughter.
She didn't go
right,
in.
I did know that.
So she didn't have any ear or anything. So we were just going for a routine checkup.
Oh.
Like the 3-month visit.
Mhm.
And I was at work same way. And then Savannah called me in tears and said, "Hey,
Are you sitting down?
We're
kind
going
of
to
thing?
Children's." And I was like,
Yeah.
"What's happening?" They're like, they said she's got a murmur. And I was like, "Oh, I've got a heart murmur. That's
Yeah.
nothing." And she was
So
like,
did my wife.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah. But again, same thing. They wanted her to get bigger before they could do the surgery. And then COVID hit, and they said, "Well, we want to wait
my
until
goodness.
we get cleared up on that." But they actually, she didn't have to have open heart surgery, but they went in through an artery in her leg, and they didn't get to use the pericardial sac to close it up. He said it was like a little metal top hat, and they went
Okay.
in through the heart and then just kind of plugged it up, and then
That's
it grew
insane.
around it. But that's the exact same thing.
Oh, my goodness.
She woke up from it, and she
That's
was like,
why we were looking at each other.
I
as you
I
were
saw
telling
that.
me.
she woke up and she's like, "What's going on? I want this out of my hand. I'd like to go home now, please." And she's she's gaining weight. She's getting all this
Wow.
feedback. So that's awesome that
Yeah,
God was
that's
able
awesome.
to do the
Oh,
same
yeah.
thing for you.
We're so thankful to God and modern medicine because
Yes.
it just blew my mind just what they were able to do. And it was just like that day, I'll never forget just so many, there was people with my connections from the Marines and all that. There was people praying all around the world for him when that was happening. And then to just hand him to that anesthesiologist that day. And it was like, they couldn't eat like 12 hours before. And you're talking about a 3-month-old. And like, he never cried. That next day, I think he had a little bit of Pedialyte at like 9 o'clock that night. And then that next day, I mean, it was several hours before the surgery, and he was just laughing and carrying on, just smiling at everybody. And then, like, right before the surgery, I was holding him, and he was asleep. And I handed him to the anesthesiologist, and then he walked down the hall. And you talk about all these things that your parents say, you'll understand one day. It's like, I understood that day.
Yeah.
And just watching that, my wife go through that and struggle and try to do everything for him. And then he just going right like this, not gaining anything.
Yes.
So, but I mean, if you met him now, it's just like, and you can barely see his scar, it's about a 7-inch scar, but you barely see anything. And if people that don't know that story, you tell them, their eyes just bug out. Like, I'd never know because he's just so vibrant and everything. He never hushes. And then Jocelyn came along. She's healthy and happy and sassy as all get out, and she's just wild. And but that's kind of us. So Rebecca grew up at Mount Pisgah. Her dad is the print shop director there. We print whole Bibles. And ship them all over the world. And she grew up there at Mount Pisgah, went, from daycare until she graduated, kind of a thing. So Then she went off to Pensacola Christian College and she got her nursing degree. Worked at UT for a couple of years now. She works a private practice, pediatrics. And a few years back, I was ordained, and I'm a deacon there at Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, and we're just trying to serve the Lord and trying to continue to do His will, and just try to do whatever that is. Now it's kind of like I was so sure about everything that you're supposed to do. Like I knew that's what I was supposed to do and all that. And it's like now it's like we're in God's will, but it's like you want to make sure you're still doing that. It's like you just be faithful and do what you're supposed to do. Do anything that comes up, anything that you're asked to do, kind of a thing. But that's my little spiel there. But,
How did you and Jonathan used to work together? Is that how you met Jonathan?
So when I came to Mount Pisgah, I started high school there. It was like 99 going into 2000. His oldest brother was my principal, and he had been there about 8 months. So hadn't been there very long. He was a youth pastor there. He became my principal. And then, honestly, I don't think I met Jonathan until probably 2005. And it was kind of just a vague, like, oh, he's in town. He went to Crown College, and we kind of just meet. It wasn't really, he's 2 or 3 years older than I am, so it wasn't really, didn't get to know each other. And then we started working together in 2013 or 14 was when, I guess, when we really met and became friends.
Right.
And I had known their middle brother. I worked with him before. I've known him since 2010, I guess. Josh, I worked with him all these years. We've worked at now 3 different jobs together. So
who's following who?
He was at the first one, and then I came there. We didn't even really know each other. That's when we met, and then I left and brought him to that one, and now I've kind of followed. So I guess he's on the
leading side.
Yeah, he's
right
on the
now.
leading side right now.
Right. Yeah, I know there's several people I know that just our the abilities that we have tend to take us to the, because in the Oak Ridge area, if one place shuts down, usually something else starts up, and the people with those set of skills just go from place to place. Usually end up working several different jobs with the same people.
I've only ever had the 3 jobs, and I've not carried over anything from any of them. But they're not specialty plant jobs, so I get that. It's really hard to transfer skills from a fast food restaurant to a concrete plant, and then from a concrete plant to a bath remodeler.
But if you think if you would stay in the concrete business,
Oh, yeah.
you would keep running across the same people. Yeah, it's that type of...
Names do kind of tend to overlap on that. I get that.
Right.
So that was
Intense.
probably the most comprehensive testimony.
I was going to put intense on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean that too, but that's you said at the beginning it's different than probably a lot of people's different testimonies, and just like Mr. Clowers that was here, it's kind of the same ball game of that of
Yes.
you never really had your quote unquote wild streak, but to me that's just as powerful, if not more powerful, of a testimony to show that you don't have to have that time in your life, that you can still follow God's path and be that, and by no means be perfect,
Right.
but definitely
still
save
need
yourself
Christ.
a lot of heartache, and still having that understanding of the needing of Christ.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of people that kind of, if you don't have that time in your life, it's almost kind of hard to understand why you do need Christ if everything's going good. I can see that being kind of a stumbling block for somebody
Absolutely.
to have that. And then like with us, when you get to that point and you get sucker punched with, whoa, no, I do need Christ. Yeah, I would much prefer the coming to it casually.
I think it would be hard, because I started down the same path as him and Clower. If I would have stayed in that path, I think it would be hard to fight against the pride that wells up in you.
Yes.
And so, and you see that a lot of time in the scripture when people are really close to God and everything, you just like we talked about this morning with Job. Pride wells up in their life, and so everybody has a struggle. It doesn't have to be drugs or something. Pride's just as big a sin as anything else.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate sin, really.
And full disclosure, I think what I struggled with mainly as a younger person, a teenager, and I carried a lot of that over, was the prodigal son, his older brother,
Yes,
that was so
yeah,
upset
absolutely.
about why are you bringing him back and all that stuff. And I had some issues. I had a lot of issues with that. Was because it was like, well, I didn't do this and I didn't do that, but there's a bitterness that you can get in your heart that is very real, and it's very strong, and it also just a sin. Sin is the same. It doesn't
Yes.
matter what it is.
Right.
And I struggled with that for a long time. Was that well, I didn't do this and I didn't do that, and you didn't throw me a party, and you didn't give me a ring, and
Yes.
you didn't, and so, and I feel like that happens a lot with people that grow up in that quote unquote bubble. And that was the other thing too. When I left to go to the Marines, I had a lot of people come and talk to me like, "You know where you're about to go, right?"
Yeah.
And it was like, I do. And it was, so it's like, well, you must be a Marine, because you're crazy. Like you're going to do it. And there was no.
I was going to ask you how did that go?
What's that?
When you actually got in the Marines,
Um,
how, because of the bubble.
It was a culture shock.
Yeah.
It really was, and it was one of those. I had an uncle. He's in heaven now, and he was in the Navy back in the '60s, and he pulled me aside and talked to me. And there was a lot of people that, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. They were like, "This is what you're about to see. It's what you're
Sure.
about to experience, and everything." And it was. I was able to see several people saved throughout that time.
Awesome.
One of my best friends in the world, him and his wife and their two daughters, they're missionaries in Japan now. When I was in Okinawa, his name's Jeff and Andrea Wright, and Jeff was he was from the Bay Area in California, sold drugs all through high school. Parents were on drugs, different things like that. And then there was a church there in Okinawa, Maranatha Baptist Church. I was able to get involved. And honestly, it's like I tried to, when I was in the Marines, people find out that you're a Christian and everything. You
Yes.
start talking to them, and then you're like, okay, we got something. And then they would, quote unquote, embarrass me
Sure.
in front of everybody. And then I kind of had to distance myself from them. And Jeff, I befriended two guys, Jeff Wright and Chris Folsom, and they weren't saved. Never even like accidentally walked by a church. And that to this day, they're some of my best friends. Jeff and Andrew are down. They're in Japan now. They're missionaries. Chris Folsom and his wife later got saved. That could be another story for another day. But they both got saved, and they live up in Wisconsin now. But just the different experiences, the people I've met and everything,
Yeah.
there's no other way to explain it but then that was God.
Mm-hmm.
That the things that I was able to do, places that I was able to see, and just the situations that I was in. We joke about this thing, and Jonathan denounces it all the time. We call it the Reid curse. It's kind of like Murphy's Law. And it's like when I was in Afghanistan, we went up to the thing to get the radios before we went outside the wire. And it was like I was the next person in line. Oh, we're out of radios. So the truck, I'm in. I was like truck number 15. They said, well, you're in the mix. You're fine.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. So come to find out later, the signal jammers that are on all four corners of the truck, they're supposed to block any IED, transmitting signals or anything. Those didn't work. Just different things like that. It's fun to look back at that stuff and to realize how many people were actually, praying for me driving through Afghanistan with no communication and bad signal jammers, and just different things like that. I could go on for days about just how good God has been to us and what He's done through us, been able to do through us, and I give all the glory to Him. But I would say one of the things that whenever I do have an opportunity like this, my pastor asked me a few years ago on Father's Day to ask me, what it meant to be a father. And it was at this time Jocelyn wasn't even here yet. I was still new, and so I always kind of had to revert back to um, what my parents did, and they're not amazing people. They you know they're just people, you know, but they wanted us to succeed for God, and they pushed everything in that direction. And what I try to challenge people with is be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was there was never there was never a time you couldn't play them.
Right.
Like, well, mom said this, but it was like, what'd they say? It was always, what did she say? What did he say?
Yes.
And then it would just shut it down. It was one of those, and it was, everybody wants their safe space and all that stuff now. That was, my home was my safe space.
Absolutely.
I knew no matter how crazy it was, no matter where I'd been, the things I'd seen, the things I'd been exposed to, I could always go home.
Mm-hmm.
That was that place where I could, so that's what that's what I try to encourage people, and I ever have that opportunity, is to be consistent, because there's going to be they're going to have all the inconsistencies that they could ever be, on the planet.
Right.
And so that's where it needs to be. And I think that's what helped me tremendously, and that's what helped Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it was across the board. When we got home, that was it. That was where, everything was okay. Everything that was, they had it looked like they had it together.
Sure.
And if I asked them, they'd be like, "You're crazy," But we didn't have it together at all. But it was like, that was because they put their focus on God,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, and there was nothing else. There was no, we weren't distracted by different things like that. So that was anytime I get an opportunity, consistency is the thing.
Absolutely.
I try to push, and that's what I strive. And, it's like we have a 4-year-old, and he's already trying to, come up. Well, Mama said I could watch this movie, and I said, well, if she said it, that's fine or whatever. But you're starting to see that, and it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy how quickly that starts to develop.
Oh, absolutely.
See if I can get an angle here or play them against each other. So.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I'd like to encourage people to do, and pray for me as well, because that's what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I had that in my home very consistent. I didn't always like the consistency,
Right.
but it was I knew what I had, and it was, like you said, a very safe space,
Mm-hmm.
but very consistent, very strict, but
Mm-hmm.
very consistent. So Jonathan, he's rattling your chain. He says,
Who's that?
Jonathan.
Who's that?
Oh yeah, who? Barker.
Yeah.
Jonathan Barker.
That guy.
Yeah, I know him.
He said the prodigal son's brother only lacked a mirror to see his filth.
Exactly.
And then he said the Reid curse is perspective only.
He's seen it every now and then. And he's still. He's not accepting it yet. It does happen, but.
So, I was gonna. That's amazing that when, people that are raised in the bubble, as me and you and Clower, because I moved from a little bitty town. Everybody knew me, small population at the time, maybe 10,000. Moved to Columbia, South Carolina by
Mm-hmm.
myself, on my own.
Mm.
Lost my mind. It's almost like going in the service. I mean, it was just anything and everything you could think of.
Right.
And so I totally was not prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear other people's perspective, and to know that you, even though you were raised in that bubble, that you followed God's will, even in, so to speak, the worst situation. Joining the service as a child of God.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, many people probably looked at you and like, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah. A lot of people try to, like, "Are you sure?"
Yeah.
But my parents never. They didn't question it. It was one of
Right.
those, like, you said it.
But I
you
mean,
said
to
this is
hold your
God's
faith
will.
in that,
Yeah.
and to actually
Yeah.
work, and to hear you talk about leading people to Christ during that time, and you found a church where you were stationed, and all that type thing. I talk to a lot of people when we go on vacation, and when we go on vacation, we're there over the weekend. We find a church to worship at.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
find an assembly
Mm-hmm.
to find members of the church
Mm-hmm.
to worship with, and wherever I go, I'm looking for the church. not
Right.
a building. I'm looking for members of the Bride of Christ to spend, my day with.
It was during that time, before I left for boot camp, there were a lot of doubts. The devil really came after me and different things. And then there was this, I went to uh, Mount Pisgah used to do a 4th of July thing at Pastor Wall's out at his house, out at their property, just in the yard. We'd, do everything out there, have a big meal and all that. And their guest that evening, his name was Tyler Ryberg, and he's a missionary to the military. And what he does is wherever you're going to go, he can find you a church. And it was just like there were so many things that just kept backing up that this is okay. This is what I'm supposed to do. What I'm supposed to do because my aunt, the same one that led me to Jesus, was the. She said, "Let me enter. This is my nephew. He's about to go to boot camp, and so he got all my information, and it was like, I went to boot camp, and you kind of pick where you want to go, and the Marines is very limited. It's East Coast, West Coast, or Pacific. That's all you get, and they're horrible. And so I thought, well, I had no desire to go to the West Coast, so I said Pacific, East Coast, and the West Coast was the very last thing. So I got Okinawa, Japan, and then I let him know, and it was like, and there was this man who ran out of that church. His ministry was to the single Nana company, and his name was Herb and Gloria Gray. 20 plus years in the Marines, retired, and worked as a government service on base, but ran that ministry for Maranatha. And then it was like he came to the barracks. He came to the barracks and was like I was contacted by Tyler Ryberg and then it was like, now that they're one of my best friends on the planet. And they were kind of my second parents because it's like you're out on your own, kind of one of those things. And that was somebody, he became my Sunday school teacher there and all this stuff. And then just to talk to you like a person, you're talking about this guy that's been in nearly 30 years in the Marines, and I'm just a peon. We're at opposite ends of the spectrum, but just talk to you like a human being. And there was people in that church that they were stationed there, and they'd invite us over to their house for Bible study and feed us. And it was just like there's a lot of people that actually do this stuff, and they don't get the recognition. And then when I got ready to leave Okinawa, I tried to stay there my whole 4 years. I loved it. I mean, it's a tropical island. You can go snorkeling almost year round, So it was like, I said, I'm going to be stationed in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and I asked, where am I supposed to go now? What's the church I'm supposed to find? And they said, there's this little bitty Baptist church right there in Jacksonville, Grace Baptist Church, and I went there, and just that's how God works this out. I walked right up to this guy, and I said, I'm supposed to find Jim Hart, and he said, you found him. So then became really good friends with them. They did the same thing there, running the ministry out of their house, and we pretty much lived there because in Okinawa, you're trapped on this island. It was more kind of like a family environment. You got really close to those people. When I got to Lejeune, they could live out in town. And so everybody, it was kind of every man for himself. We also changed presidents during that time, and things changed drastically. I don't want to get into that, but changed drastically, and it was just like, it was horrible. And so that was when Grace kind of moved in, and so became really good friends with them. Still talk to them every now and then.
Awesome.
They're in my network. I need you to pray for this, need you to pray for that. Different things now. We still keep in touch, but you can just see God all the way through it. And it goes so much further back. It starts with my grandparents that prayed for me before I was even born, and then my parents. And I'll always say, like I think it bothers my wife a little bit. My mom was always my biggest fan. You talk about that, all these letters and everything, and then you could almost feel it. I know my dad was there too, but you could just feel, the prayers of my mom, and just would not let you go. And that's only by the grace of God. That's the only way I survived going through the Marines, being in that environment, and just the things we saw in Afghanistan. Just knowing that thousands of people back home were praying for me that I could always come home. That was that's a lot of them don't have that. They don't have that to come back to. Right. There's no network. And then it was like, even when I got out, that's it. They kind of reach out to you a little bit to try to get you into the reserves and stuff like that. Once you tell them no 2 or 3 times, that's it.
Yeah.
They're done. So it's kind of very thankful for my time there. It was it was an honor to do it. I would do it again.
Sure.
I would, at the drop of a hat. Nate and I were joking about it. He said if they called me today, he's like I'd go back. So
Yeah.
it's one of those.
Sure.
Just all glory to God.
So the theme that I'm seeing here, different than me. So 3 of us raised in a bubble. So for these 2 guys that we've had on, the theme is they reach out when they went to different areas, and they knew what they needed.
Yeah.
They needed connections. They needed other members of the bride. They knew they needed that. Where for me, I wasn't looking for it.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for the bride. I had all these new toys to play with, and and I wasn't looking for God's people. I wasn't looking for God. I wasn't, I was outside the bubble, and I wanted to see what all was outside the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
I had no desire to live in the bubble anymore. Where these guys wanted that, like you talking about, that safety that God gives you, and you desired that, and you knew what it took to keep that was you had to connect with more of God's people wherever you are.
Yeah.
And I do that now. Like I say, when I go on vacation, wherever I go, I find God's people, and they're easy to find, really. I
Right.
mean, if you're looking,
If you're looking,
you can find them. But I wasn't looking. I wasn't searching them out.
Well, that's what it is. You have to actually want to do that. Jacob, he said he saw a track or
Scrambled up on the.
like a piece of paper somebody had discarded, and it was for a Bible study on the campus. And he said he had been praying, looking for that. But that's incredible that you were able to seek that out. That was what you were looking for in that. And I think a big difference too. Jacob went to college, so he was thrown into that environment. He was still somewhat local. He was just in a different part of that. You went to the military. That you at least had structure. You had a pretty rigid structure.
Yeah.
So you had that. You were just wide open.
Yes.
You didn't. There was no class.
Here's
structure.
one thing I really thought of too, and it kind of breaks my heart, and I even hate to say it, but it needs said, is that I cannot remember one phone call. Not one. That said, hey, been praying for you.
Yeah.
Or, how you doing? Or, have you found the church? Or, who's your friends? Or, nothing.
Well, I think and really what I was getting from what you were saying as well is that there's such a broad body of believers out there that are doing these different things, that are looking out for that, and it's a tragedy that you didn't get those calls, because that could have been the difference right
Absolutely.
there. That could have been the motivation to put you there. I think we don't realize the responsibility as disciples of Christ that we have. It's not just services. It's not just revivals. It's not just prayer meetings. It's we're to uplift, to uphold, to help each other. And when you're put into that environment, when you're cast into something new, when you're going into the unknown, I think we talked about it last night. You need somebody that's going to be there for you in the background, fighting for you. Somebody that's going to be there to uplift you in prayer, and somebody just to check on you.
Absolutely.
Just to say, hey, how are you? Because when I had gone away from God, if someone had asked me how my relationship was, or what they could pray for me for, I think that at that moment it would have broken and it would have spilled out, and I would have came back quicker. Of course, I didn't leave town. I didn't have my new world.
You
was
left town in your mind.
Exactly. My new adventure was I had money and free time, and I made do with what I could with where I was, and I pretty fortunate that I was still in somewhat of a safe bubble. But again, the importance of being there for one another and being proactive and being there. It's one thing to say, I'm here if you need me, just give me a call. It's another thing to reach out yourself and initiate that.
Jonathan said, nobody is willing to call, but everybody is ready to judge.
Absolutely.
And I had so many people that would, would reach out to me. The guy that, when I grew up in the tabernacle, I did the sound and all that stuff. And it was just, I don't know. I like things neat and precise, and I like the things be dialed in and all that stuff. So that was something I could really, I don't know. I feel like I'm glad I was born when I was, because they'd probably diagnose me with something now. So I'd be on medication. But it was just like, that was something I like to do. But then the guy that, made copies of the CDs and everything, I still have this binder to this day. They sent me every service.
Oh,
I have this binder of CDs the whole 2 years I was in Okinawa. So it was just like, there was a lot of people, and I would encourage anybody, somebody that's going off to college, somebody that's going in the military. There was I had this community, and they say it takes a village, and it's like, it really did. That it was like, there was a lot of people that were going to say, not on my watch, that just were not going to let it happen, because I think there was enough of them, like I mentioned earlier, the veterans and stuff that I was around. A lot of them were saved, had no, no knowledge of Jesus when they were in Vietnam, when they were crawling across the beaches of Normandy and stuff like that, and so they really kind of encouraged everybody, like, you're going to have to, this could go south very quickly if you don't keep up on it. And I just had this constant influx of letters and cards and things like that, and it just, that's God's people, and they really, they knocked it out of the park, as far as that goes, because it very well could have gone that way, and it could have.
Yes.
Could have gone south quickly.
Absolutely.
So,
That's a great testimony on their part.
Yes.
yeah, it really is. And a lot of them are in heaven now. I was always around a lot of older people. I was always, that's who I grew up around. There's 35 years between me and my dad. So I was always with his friends and things like that. And so people he looked up to and emulated and stuff like that. So I was always around those people. But those are, memories I'll never forget. The people I was raised around and under, who they tried to purposely put me around, was people like that, so that I could learn stuff from, pull from.
Yeah, we've had this conversation already, but there's 50 years between me and my dad.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
And both of us gravitated toward older people, and still do, I think. I have more in common talking to people, much greater my age than I do people of my own.
I struggle with people around my age, but it's like he was talking about before we came on air that I was in overalls that day. That an old guy come in, I can talk to them for hours. Some old guy in overalls, we can sit and talk for.
I do want you to know that I was almost in overalls, but they happened to be in the wash that day, or I would have joined you in that.
I'm an old soul when it comes to stuff like that.
Well, I relate to that too. I still have plenty of friends, that I went to school with that I'm, kind of distant acquaintance with, it feels like now, because they're out living their lives in different places, and I kind of stayed here, and I still think fondly of them, but the people that I talk to the most are 40 plus in the church and around me. I say 40 to be nice. Some of them are creeping up there a little bit higher, but that's what it is, and I don't know that it's anything in particular other than I see it as God placing mentors around me, of people that have been farther down the road than I am, to kind of help guide me in that way. And just like we talked about earlier this morning, of listen to your parents, and that's a secret to a long life. Of course, that's paraphrasing. It kind of works in the spiritual life too, of listen to the people that have been down that road before, because they can show you the pitfalls of where to go. And if you surround your children with godly elders, let's say, that's a good way, the village, to help raise that child up in that way.
Yes.
Did you were looking at the thing? Did we get another message?
No, I was just thinking about how we misquote the Indian totem pole all the time. You know, we say,
Mhm.
"Oh yeah, you're at the top of the totem pole." Well, that's the babe. The guy on the very bottom.
Oh, I had no idea what you were talking about.
The guy on the very bottom is the chief, and then it goes from there up, and then the newest member of the tribe is on top. It's the top of the totem pole is the babe of the village, because the rest of them are carrying them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact I didn't know. So what is your current day-to-day work for God? I know you said you're a deacon. Kind of what are your...
Yeah, just what I try to do now is I try to. I grew up. We're a very work-oriented family, and it's a. If you're going to do anything, you're going to wear yourself out doing it, and that's what. And my dad always pushed that as from a young age. He taught me how to do everything. It was we were always fixing something. We'd try to fix it ourselves. If we made it worse, then we'd take it somewhere. And
Got to make that.
we're
going to
attempt it,
Yeah.
and one of those things. And now, so what I try to do now is I try to be an example. Try to work and do what I'm supposed to do to honor God, and I think people see that. And now, working with them at the coffee shop, and just different things, be able to just, I've really started to, I guess Jonathan's pulled me out of that more, is be able to talk to people. Because I it's like, you're talking about shy don't even cut it. It's like, it's insane for me for me to even think about me sitting here doing this. I was not I don't want to talk in front of anybody kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But just being able to serve in the church, just do whatever, teach Sunday school, and just I've really enjoyed being a deacon. Now COVID has really messed it up because I like to go and sit and talk to the widows, but 9 times out of 10 you just get it going and then you just sit there and they just sit, and that was, I think we were talking about that. We had Philip and I had talked about that before. Was you talk to these widows and they're talking about when we first moved here, we had $20 to our name. We had a pound of flour, and then he was working in the mines in Oliver Springs. And it's just like to wrap your head around that, to where we think about how we have to prepare for everything and how we're going to make this and that. And she's just like, and just to look at her now in her 80s and 90s and give all the credit to God.
Yes.
Because just to hear their stories and stuff, a quarter tank of gas and $20 to their name as a family, and and then they
just
look at
do
them
whatever
now,
God said do.
and it's just like you can draw so much from them, and they're widows, their husbands are gone, just to go and talk to them. It's and how much they study their Bible and pray. It's very humbling to. But you start to like, okay, this is how they make it. This is how they made it all this time. It's very encouraging, and they just dote on our kids, and just bringing them monster trucks and baby dolls and stuff all the time, and just it's kind of just one of those whatever I can to help help it around at the church. I'm more of I'd rather be the guy scrubbing baseboards somewhere. I'm that kind of rather be the behind the scenes person. I'm not the social butterfly like our buddy Jonathan.
The deacon's job is not to tell the pastor what to do.
No.
Oh man, that's all. I'm all confused.
I about to say, I think we need to put a memo out for other deacons.
Yeah.
So Jonathan does really have a good way of figuring out a way to get you out of your comfort zone.
God's given him a gift.
So I have,
Gift of gab.
believe it or not, I have anxieties speaking to people as well. To me, I don't think about me talking to anybody but you two,
Right.
and occasionally Freddie, so it's easier for me. But I was talking to him Saturday morning. Two women had come into the coffee shop while I was sitting there, and they asked if they could sit at the table because it's kind of small. I said, sure, that's fine. And I'm talking to Jonathan, and they kind of they're chirping in here and there, and he walks off, and it's like, okay. And he told me later, he was like, if I hadn't walked off, you'd have used me as a safety net. And I was like, well, I didn't ask for the safety net to be removed. But no, it's, as ambassadors for Christ, we are called to show love. And part of showing love is just having conversations with people, just showing, that friendly hand out there. And that is something I struggle with.
He does.
He does. He does. But it is one of those things, you're a very good hybrid of mine and Philip, of our stories. You've got all of the good thrown in there, and thankfully none of the bad from what I can tell. But that's awesome. Everything that I've seen click in that. And now that I know your name, when I come to the
You won't
coffee
remember
shop,
it next time.
I will, because it's the same as the
'Cause
other
it's same
Jonathans.
as-
Right.
Yeah. But when I walk in
What's
the door,
his last name?
Reid.
Oh.
When I walk into the coffee shop, I don't want to hear, "Hey, that pastor, that reverend guy's here, Jonathan." You ain't got to say my name, but at least say, "Hey." That's fantastic. We appreciate that, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I was going to get to that before we close.
Oh yeah, the entire time I was like, "When's the best time to jump in there?" Because I'm sure the military stories aren't going to stop yet. But yeah, we definitely appreciate the service of all of our servicemen and women out there, and whatever branch you serve. We quite literally wouldn't be here without you.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you were front lines, truck driving, sitting at a computer. You're braver than I am, and you're doing a job that we are grateful for.
Again, it takes a village.
It does.
All parts.
Yeah.
You got anything else?
I don't.
I don't.
You good and clear?
If I talk anymore, I'll be crying again.
This is a good one. Like I said,
Good.
it's such a thorough and concise, and I think that speaks. I don't know if that's military background, if that's just your personality.
I think that's David Reid.
There you
That's my dad. It was always like stand up straight and yes sir, no sir, and talk to somebody's talking to you. You better be
Absolutely.
standing up.
Yeah.
It was one of those things, and so that's really and I struggled with that for a long time. They say, oh, you become your parents, and it was I pull from both sides, but it's one of those. I finally came to terms with it, and I'm pretty much him made over. So. So yeah, that's where a lot of that comes from. So the military just made it more,
Yeah, they put more structure to the
Just-
structure.
Yes.
beat it into you more.
Yes.
We definitely appreciate you joining us here today. One kind of out of the way thing I want to mention to everybody. We talked in church about this already. On a personal note, one of my friends from high school was recently diagnosed with cancer, gastric cancer. Her and her husband have kind of been struggling through this. They have a young son. Her name is Samantha Smith. If you guys could just keep her in your prayers as she goes into this struggle. She's just now getting diagnosed, starting into this, and she is actually, not her. She has a lot of very good, very close-knit friends from high school, and one of them has taken the liberty of starting to sell shirts with proceeds going to Samantha and her family. So if you would like to help donate and contribute with that, her name is Lindsay Higgins, Lindsay with an E. I may be able to link her profile to that. I'm sure she'd love to hear from you. At the very least, pray for Samantha because she definitely needs that. But she has these shirts that she's selling, and she has a verse that I'd like to read you. And I thought this was really awesome because it's in my favorite book. So it's in Isaiah, and the verse that she has on the shirts is Isaiah 40:31. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. And I think with the battle that she's got ahead of her, that's the perfect verse for that. Because she does have a battle ahead of her, but I know that God can pull her through it. So I told them I'd put that out there for them. And, like you were saying, the prayers of people the other side of the world had that impact on your life. I can speak to how prayer has impacted my life. So I know that the prayer of the body can impact her. So she really needs that, and I'd greatly appreciate that too. We thank you for joining us today. Whether this is recorded live or on the podcast, it's humbling with the amount of people that have been listening to us.
Oh yes.
Because it's not us.
No.
As much as I love you,
Yeah. Nobody wants to listen to us.
no. And this is just more confirmation that God is really moving. So we can't thank you enough for just participating and coming along this ride with us. We love your questions. We've been getting, since I've been added on it as admin, I've been getting messages pop up all over the place on Facebook. We love to hear from you. You can message, comment on this later. You can email us at blessingandcursing3019gmail.com.
We're on YouTube now also.
We are on YouTube. I keep forgetting that. We do have YouTube videos, so this is another way to get those spread out.
You can see the coffee shop on YouTube.
You can. So one thing we've been doing differently, we have been, you have been, since you're down there more often, on Facebook Live and on YouTube. We've been doing the coffee shop singings. I don't know.
What do they call that?
Yeah.
What do they call it, Jonathan, if you're still on here?
What it is we meet at Jonathan's. I can't say we. I've not been a part of it yet because I've worked different schedules. But you guys have been meeting at the coffee shop, and it's just been a good worship session from what I can gather. And I think that speaks to how good it is to be the business owner that you can do things like that. It's a great time to worship, and we'd love for you to check those out and comment on those too, and just share us, not for us, but for the message of God to get out there a little bit farther. And that can be a way that you can help us spread the gospel out as well, so that more people can come to know the glory of the Lord.
Jonathan said it's called worship.
Okay, so they've been having worship at the coffee shop.
It was on Thursdays, and then it's kind of moved to Fridays, so it kind of bounces around. So
Sometimes playtime, he says.
It's always a fun time to worship and to join together with the brothers and the Lord, brothers and sisters, the body of believers. Anything else to add, take away from it? All right, folks, bless you in the meantime. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
thank you.